Ladies and gentlemen, Manchester United have bolstered their attack this season. Benjamin Sesko has signed from RB Leipzig to Manchester United. Transfer fee worth 76.5 million plus 8.5 million with add-ons. Total package worth 85 million. That's a lot of money for a young striker. Sesko agreed to personal terms and agreed to sign a contract until 2030 after he made it very clear that he only wanted Manchester United. Transfer saga is over. Newcastle United and Manchester United have been going back and forth all window to get Benjamin Sesko. And even after Newcastle sent an official bid worth more than Manchester United's official bid, Sesko made it clear he wanted United and pushed RB Leipzig to get him that move. Newcastle offered a 90 million total package deal to RB Leipzig, whereas, like I said before, United only did an 85 million package deal, undercutting Newcastle's higher bid. But also, reportedly, Newcastle also offered Sesko higher wages for him to earn, but he opted for the move to Manchester United in the end, who reportedly he took less wages at, so it's clear he loves the club and he wants to go there, which he is now. It looks like he never even gave Newcastle a second thought, and you really got to feel bad for them at this point. Every target on Newcastle United's list has gone elsewhere this summer. Hugo Ekitike went to Liverpool after they hijacked the deal for him to go to Newcastle. There's Brian Mbeumo, João Pedro, they want to bolster their attack after Isak's future's pretty uncertain. But anyway, back to United. They get the 22-year-old Slovenia international. Sesko scored 13 goals for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga last season. He's still very raw and needs to develop more, obviously, as he's young, so don't judge 13 goals too harshly. On paper, Sesko has the abilities to develop into one of the best strikers in the world, be a world-class forward. He's 6'5", great in the air, winning his duels, quick, technically pretty sound. He scores brilliant goals. He's got a great goal catalogue. He's actually the top goal scorer aged under 23 since 2023 in Europe's top 5 leagues. A pretty good record to hold at a very young age too. And not to mention, he's brilliant at striking the ball. He just laces it. He's got pure power on his legs. He's like Zlatan. And that's his idol, so congrats to him. But to have all that at 22 is pretty exceptional. And, the sky's the limit for him, really. But talent is only talent, and it can only get you so far in the top level of football. Can Manchester United now develop and mould him into that world-class striker that we know he can be? Now, obviously, we're talking about Man United here. They don't have the best track record when it comes to spending big money on players and platforming them to perform their best. In recent years, at least, especially. Paul Pogba is the best example I can give. Pogba was brought back to United after playing in the youth academy, after serving his years at Juventus, being a top centre midfielder. 105 million is what they paid to get him back. He was meant to be the next big thing, he was unstoppable at Juventus. But he came back to United and never reached the heights that we all knew he had the potential to do. And yeah, he won the Europa League with Man United, but he was meant for way more. He had the ceiling to be one of the best centre midfielders we've ever seen. He had the potential, the skill set, the ability. He was ridiculous, but he just couldn't reach those heights. For a time at United, he was just locked into playing in a double pivot midfield, really restricting his game. The impact Paul Pogba can have on the field is ultimately restricted when he's playing in a double pivot in the midfield. He can't go up forward as much as he likes to because he's got those defensive duties that he really shouldn't be taking care of. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to platforming players correctly. And now when it comes to Benjamin Sesko, can United platform him correctly? Allow him to develop into a top centre forward and not hold him back, give him the keys up front. And if they allow him to do that, this signing will be an instant hit and it would have been worth the risk. Because ultimately this signing is a risk. Who's to say Sesko won't flop? Anything can happen. We have no idea. Adapting to the Premier League is difficult coming from the Bundesliga. Matter of fact, any league you come from, the Premier League is just physically demanding and it's way more intense than every other league. So is he going to succeed like an Erling Haaland coming from Germany? Or dare I say like a Timo Werner coming from Germany? He'd flopped at Chelsea and Tottenham as well. Manchester United needed a striker and they opted to sign a very young one to grow into the role. There was other options on the market like Victor Gyökeres before Arsenal got him. He was the safest option when it came to just signing a for sure firing centre forward that would have came in any team and scored a lot of goals. He's very proven. There's also Victor Osimhen, a very clinical finisher, did the great things he did with Napoli a couple of years back. But United signing a very young striker and opting to build for the future is honestly the best choice they could have made. And ultimately spending money on very exciting up-and-coming players is going to be way better than spending on average players that have already reached their ceiling. We've seen players like Noni Madueke go for 50 million and Anthony Elanga go for 55 million. They're both very good, but, they're not on the level of growing into one of the best in the world. They're just very good Premier League level wingers. The market this summer is so inflated and all over the place. So why not take the punt and the risk and sign possibly a future star instead of just getting an average striker that's already reached his ceiling. 80 million plus is just the norm now to sign a very talented up-and-coming player. The body of work these players have done does not warrant their price tag, but is what they could become in the future that inflates it, their potential. Pricing of talents in the market is truly based on their potential for what they could do in the future. For example, United signing Sesko is ultimately going to be better than signing a 29-year-old Ollie Watkins that's already reached his ceiling. Like, he'll be a very good striker, but Sesko could be way better, and it's worth a risk, in my opinion. Sesko's ceiling is just way higher than Watkins, and he might not reach it, but it's worth the risk. Also, in the long run, Ollie Watkins would have a good 2 to 3 years, and then they'll go back to being in the same situation again, where they need to find a striker to go into their squad. And if they keep buying middle-aged, 30, 29-year-olds, they're just going to run into the same issue over and over again. So United building for the future and not just next season is ultimately going to improve their rebuild for the squad. And if they want to get back to the top, they need to build around their young talents and sign great young talents. And it looks like they're doing that. They got a really good young core to their squad right now. Lenny Yoro, Sesko now, Kobe Manu, and Carlos Baleba, if they get him, they're linked to him from Brighton. Signing players and building a squad around players like this, really puts the club in a good spot for the future. And even if Sesko doesn't come through the gates firing instantly, he's still got Premier League proven Brian Mbeumo and Mateus Cunha next to him up front. A combined 35 goals between those two for them last season. Sesko won't hold the burden by himself. It probably is worth mentioning that is a $208 million attack that United have now. It should work out, but they don't have the best track record when it comes to signing big money players. And that does raise the question, where was all that money last season when they needed reinforcements in the window? United had a really thin squad and needed bolstering during last season. We all thought the club was broke, they were firing kitchen staff for God's sake. But then out of nowhere, they just spend 200 million on their attackers and they're still not finished. They still need to sign a midfielder, and they've been interested in signing a midfielder like Carlos Baleba, like I just said. Brighton do plan to keep him. It's not in Brighton's plans to let him go, but United are very interested and obviously want to get in front of the pack before, the next window, he's going to have every team in the world looking at him. The price tag would be ridiculous due to him having 3 years on his contract still. It's going to be like more than Caicedo was. So it's going to be very difficult for Baleba to leave Brighton this summer. But the intention from United is still there. They obviously have money if they're interacting with a new target that they want to sign. You don't just approach another club if they don't have the money to back it up. So behind the scenes, United is still a mess. But I do agree they do definitely need a midfielder. Because Man United do struggle when it comes to building up from their defensive line, building possession up the field. Adding Carlos Baleba would instantly improve that, as is a great ball progressor and driver with the ball. And since they don't have that all-action midfielder right now, they've really been resorting to just shooting long balls up to their number 9. Whether it's Højlund, Xerxes, even Harry Maguire when he's put up there for some reason. But now Sesko's in that team and he has a real aerial presence. He's 6'5". If Ruben Amorim still chooses to employ that tactic, the Hail Mary long balls over the top to the number 9, United will find more success due to Sesko's abilities in the air. Sesko should be a handful for defenders when it comes to that. And Sesko's a way better fit into Amorim's system, way better than a Højlund or a Xerxes. We saw with Xerxes that adaptation period to the Premier League that he went through. Pretty much just took the first half of the Premier League season off just to adjust to the league. There was that game where he was substituted off and booed when he walked down the tunnel. But the second half of the season, he really grew into the role and really found a spot for him in that squad. A great link-up striker. He was really good at just getting the ball moving in that forward line. But as for Rasmus Højlund, surely his time at United is over. And actually, the fees for Sesko and Højlund are pretty comparable. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure Højlund was like 75-ish million and Sesko's 85, 10 mil difference, not that big. But just from a scouting point of view, Sesko is way more talented and shown more signs that he can become a great striker. Whereas Højlund was just way too raw in Serie A and joined United really early, way too early for him to develop. He didn't have enough minutes under his belt to really develop into a good striker that early in his career. He didn't play at the top level for long enough. Sesko was more developed at this point than Højlund was when he joined United. So Højlund will probably be leaving United this summer. United are open for a loan deal for him to go, but he's reportedly just really fixated on staying at United. He's come out in the press, on social media and saying that he's committed to Manchester United. Being a childhood fan and all that, I understand that. But you also need to look at the professional side of it. This is professional football and he's obviously just not good enough to be Premier League Manchester United level forward. So AC Milan are actually in talks for him to go on loan. United want to put a buy option on the loan deal and want them to cover all of his salary. So we'll see what happens there, but hopefully Sesko doesn't end up like Højlund at United. United have really tried everything when it comes to signing new strikers. If they try to sign young strikers, they flop. If they try to sign old strikers, they flop. If they try to sign a striker in the prime years of their career, they still somehow flop. The number 9 position at Manchester United is just a big ask for any player. So much is expected of you and everyone's watching. So will Benjamin Sesko find success and become a great number 9 for United? We will have to see. And actually, the season's going to start off very interesting because United face Arsenal in the first game of the season. And Sesko was actually linked to Arsenal earlier in the window. You know, they originally wanted him before Gyökeres. So Sesko could theoretically start the season on fire and show Arsenal what they missed out on. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But anyway, that's enough from me today, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this Benjamin Sesko deal to Manchester United. Are Manchester United getting a good player here, or are they just going to get another flop to add to the list? Let me know down in the comments, guys. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.